Hello and welcome to another Lightroom edit. Today I am looking at a portrait edit of an American Woodstork. These birds are great for this, and doing an image like this and then using something like a frame and mat to set it off is really beautiful. I've done this in a kind of a thick stock somewhat ornate black frame with a white mat and then a black inner mat. I always double mat if I'm going to frame, and it's really stunning. So today I'm going to, as always, we're going to reset and start with the raw image. So again, shot for the bird. I talk about this in presentations. I'm really not concerned with the backdrop other than I wish there had been more water. This would have been nice to play with in terms of a backdrop. Could have been kind of artsy with that, but we've got this sort of weird berm here. So totally shot for the bird. For Woodstorks, wait until they have their head up against their chest, or preening so their head is sort of buried in their feathers. I personally prefer that look. They can be sort of gangly looking, and this sort of makes them just a little prettier in portrait mode like this. So I'm going to try to stick to just some of the highlights today on this, some of the important points, and let's go ahead and we'll just pull in a crop. And then for this, I'd want kind of a tight outline. So a good way to do that rather than just going to background is we're going to go ahead and do an object pull. And I'm going to kind of just zoom in on the bird a little bit here. Nice tight fit. And then we're going to invert. All right, and then we're just going to get right to it and pull down all of these top sliders. Now we're going to work with some really easy elements here. I try to teach very simple ways to make dramatic edits and not get into all of the robust features that Lightroom has, because it's pretty amazing. So we're going to, I like to work freehand a lot. So I'm going to hit K, and that will bring in a freehand mask for us. And then I'm going to go ahead and just pull down the exposure because we're going to get rid of these legs. And we're just going to kind of work the body on this one. Now, if you see that exposure isn't doing everything you need it to do, and this is a little funky because this bird's leg is in the image, and that's something we'll have to work through. But I'm going to go ahead and pull some of the other sliders until we see those legs disappear just that bit more. There, the black slider is kind of taking care of that for us. And then I'm going to just left click the mouse and just sort of dot my way through this area. Now, what I did with this one also is I rotated to sort of get almost like a feather falling out of the sky. It reminded me of that feather falling on the bench that Forrest Gump was sitting on, just floating down. And so now this leg is sort of blending in. You know, you could stop this crop here somewhere and just do the upper part of the bird. For this, I'm just going to try to show technique, so I'm not going to really get into a long detailed edit here. So one of the things that first stands out to me is the shape. Now, these feathers are actually really pretty. I don't really want to get rid of them. So for me, I would more just want to sort of start with blending the bird into that black background. We don't want that sticker effect. You can see how the bird just sort of has a hard line here, and we're going to try to take care of that. Now you might pull highlights down and just see if that gives us a little more dimension, and I think it does. So we can work a little bit with the overall bird starting out, some clarity, maybe a little dehaze. Let's see, some texture and make those feathers stand out. We're going to soften some of the other feathers. And then these are just some quick things I do. Let's see, we'll sharpen a little bit and then maybe bring in some denoise. Now remember, we're playing with these things pretty liberally. If this is a competition image, it's going to go into something that isn't traditional, and doing all of these things are going to be allowed more than they would normally be. Now, one thing, take a look at your masking to begin with, because I can see a little bit right here where the black didn't quite come in all the way. So I'll just again grab a K mask, bring that exposure down, and let's just fill that in now. I might do that here, just pull closer, use your navigator tool so that you can see, and then I'm just gonna fill that in just like that. And now it really won't be a little portion that's sticking out. All right, and maybe we'll go back to 100 to work on the image. Good. All right, so now let's hit another K mask and we'll bring in our brush. So for this, sometimes it's better to start, rather than just running right to exposure, I'll grab highlights, shadows, blacks, and maybe even pull down some texture and clarity. Now we can change all of these things, but that's where I'm going to start. And I'm going to start at the top here. I really want this section to sort of blend in. Now my tool is here at a high feather and flow. So this is going to be a little more impactful. The feather is actually going to make a little less impact. So if you want to make a big difference, I would bring this feather down. It would take a lot of this out, but I want to fade the feathers into the background. So I will just start sort of painting here. Now what I'll do is usually come around the outside, and here's the overlay, okay? But I prefer to just click in and out because I want to see the actual effect in real time. Now I may just go ahead and pull down the exposure, and that's gonna, see the difference there? That's gonna start fading our bird into that backdrop. And we've got our texture, pull that texture down and clarity, and then maybe see what happens if we play with the shadows. This is all gonna be your eye, whatever suits you. Now, one thing I am keeping in mind as I'm doing this is I want to grade the shadows where they were naturally on the bird and then into the feathers here. So I want a bit of a transition as we're just going from sort of darker to lighter here. And then I also, while we're working here, I want to maybe just dot in a little bit of shadow and close your ring open or closed. Like I just want to get into a little bit of these and make some shadow. I may actually kind of fill this in a bit, make that blacker. Now, I don't particularly love the shape here, so I'm going to open this up and I'm just going to tap in and maybe just try to blend this down. So we're leaving it, but we're just making it less obvious. Okay. Maybe just, you can see there's a little bit of an indent here. So I may just throw a little bit of shadow into the neck. Now we're not going to end up doing a whole lot to this guy really. And actually, you know what? Let's go up around the head and just kind of do the same thing. We're just going to try to make that line not so harsh. And then same thing here. We're just going to fade these out a little bit. And you're just going to work this until you're happy, until you see what you like. But I'm just showing you technique here. All right. Now we could fill in a little more of the bill here, but I think for what we're trying to show today, we're just going to leave that for now. Now I'm going to grab another mask because I want to work these feathers. And I'm going to just throw texture, clarity, maybe some dehaze. And now I'm going to come in. I want these feathers to be sharper than the rest. And this is how we're going to start to bring in some dimension to the bird. We're going to sharpen parts of it and then soften others. And that's going to help the eye to feel that there is dimension. And anything else that you might want to sharpen, maybe these guys here. A lot of times I'll go ahead and just sharpen the face and the bill. And so we want to show that difference as well. This is very textured. And then we got into softer downy feathers, and then we've got these sharper ones here. So that's all I'm going to do with that mask for now, but then I'm going to grab another and keep just hitting K and bringing in your freehand masks. And now I'm going to bring down texture and clarity, and I'm just going to kind of run through these downy feathers here. I want to make this soft. And I'm just going to soften a few other sections here while we keep some of this a little nicer. Now, one thing I'll do, maybe we'll bring in a little more sharpening overall, a little more manual noise reduction, just smooth that out a bit. Not doing any denoising here. Okay, and then I'm gonna go to one more mask, I think. And I think I want to bring in a little, so we've got sort of a kind of 3 layers of feathers here. Here's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. So right in between these layers, I'm just going to do shadows, highlights, and blacks and close down. And I'm just going to sort of tap along this line. And then play with exposure a bit and just sort of make another layer of shadow. And you just keep going like this. These are the main components of just your painting with this brush for the most part. So just keep working those shadows and what you saw in real life and enhancing that. And then one of the final things I do to all my birds, I'm going to come up here with a new mask. I just made a new K mask, and I'm going to just color in that eye and maybe just bring up the exposure. There's already a really pretty natural catch light there where the light was bouncing off of its eye. And I'm going to pull up some shadow and just see where we like the eye. Just show it off a little bit. All right. And so now I've hit my enter, so I'm sort of back to square one here. And then I just sort of sit back for a second and take a look. You know, what else do I want? This type of thing going to print, I may not mind actually really bringing up that luminance and smoothing everything out. I know we're going to lose a little bit of detail, but if we want now, we could come back here and add a little more detail here since we did some noise reduction. And now think about playing with some of these other elements. You can always undo or hide the mask. So I'm going to make a quick mask here. Again, I'm just freehanding today, but I'm going to completely slide down the texture, and I'm going to kind of come over this whole bird here. Here's clarity. So again, play. There's clarity to the right. Here's clarity to the left. So play with all of these things. There's a lot of images that you all see of mine that are texture one side, clear to the other. So you can make this look more and more painterly depending on how much you want that. Here's again sliding texture. We've got so much feather detail. But for a painterly look, I might slide that texture down a little bit. We're still keeping a lot of detail. We still see the layers and the shadowing. But when this gets printed, so thinking of your print medium at the end of the day is really important too. Printing something like this to canvas, the more detail we take away, the more painterly it's going to look. Printing this to, say, a textured paper like a rag, a really high quality cotton rag, which I like to do, or there's papers that come with a beautiful linen texture. You may want to keep more detail because your paper is going to offer that change of texture for you. So there's a lot of things to consider. You know, if I'm editing a piece for artwork's sake, I'm thinking of all of those things down the road. What is this going to end up on? If it's going to end up on metal, I tend to leave more of those details and shadowing in because that metal is such a flat surface. It's not going to give us anything. And so just keep playing. You know, you could even have come back in here and, oops. Let me get out of that mask and I'm going to hit a new one. So, I mean, you could even blend out, you know, more here. I'm just going to show you guys what happens here when you go. So look how much more we can blend out and really create even more shadowing. There's so much you can do. This is maybe even a little prettier to my eye. And then maybe we take out some of this. So just play, and then, like I always suggest, grab a snapshot. So come over here underneath your navigator tool and hit that. And then just maybe you'd call this, you know, your blended edit. And now I've got this exact version that I can go back to. And if I want, I can just reset and start over. Go back here. There's our original image. And then if I want to go back to this, I can go right back and start and play with this. So I hope this was helpful. As always, if you have any questions, please email or message me on Instagram, and I am always happy to help. Have a great day.